Welcome back to Bay Sunday. Our final author today is David Mezzapelle, author of Contagious Optimism, Uplifting Stories, and Motivational Advice for Positive Thinking. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now tell us about Contagious Optimism.
Sure. Well, Contagious Optimism is an uplifting book series. It includes real stories from real people around the globe. And the purpose is to help people find their silver linings. Especially despite all the trouble they're going through, possibly going through, they need to hear silver lining stories. And for people going through good times, sometimes they need to be reminded about what's important in life. Don't take things for granted. So we really attract both audiences. Is
it difficult for us to find the silver lining?
For some people it is. For some people, trying to make heads or tails about whatever they're enduring can be a tough process, but they get through it. And a lot of times when you hear about how others have been going through tough times and persevered, it spreads a message of hope.
Tell us about some of the stories in the book.
Sure. There's one in particular I always love to share. It's about a woman named Myrtle from Raleigh, North Carolina. She was homeless. She was suffering from congestive heart failure. And she was hobbling on swollen feet due to maltreated diabetes. But she kept her strength through faith, music, and optimism. And her perseverance all paid off one day when she entered the right shelter. She connected with the right caregiver who found her the medical care she needed. And while she was on the road to recovery, this is great, while she was on the road, she decided to stumble into a local church just to give thanks for her newfound blessings. And while she was there, she talked to one of the administrators and said, "Hey, do you need someone to sing some music in your choir? I'd love to sing. I love music." And they said, "Yeah, come on Sunday. We'd love to hear your voice, and we'll see what we have for you." Well, they loved her voice, that they hired her to record a few songs for a Christmas album they were making. And I'm happy to report that today she's a gospel recording artist.
That's amazing.
Songwriter and an author. She's in our book and she's in several other books. Myrtle Newsam from Raleigh, North Carolina. And
it was optimism that led her there?
Yeah, she knew she was in tough shape, but she wanted to give blessings. She knew so much great stuff had happened for her.
Right.
And she felt that she walked into a local church and counted those few blessings, that would just open up hope for others that she got to meet.
How do you measure optimism?
How do you measure it?
How do you measure it? How can you look back, at what you're doing in your life and say, am I optimistic or am I not?
Right. It's tough to measure it, but I think when you realize, let me put it this way, when you hear how others have persevered, you realize that you too have the capability, and then you start saying to yourself, you know what, I've been through that, I've done that. I never thought anything about it, but you know what, I really need to share those stories. And then you start to count your blessings, you start to realize you have that power, and then it's hard to quantify, but you can surely qualify it.
You're also a businessman too.
Right.
Rather than just an author. And tell me about that. I mean, optimism in business too.
Sure. Well, optimism in business is very important. I mean, a lot of companies endure all types of tough times. Stock market crashes, trends. So for me, for example, in the late 90s, a company that I ran for 17 years, we did data centers. We managed data centers for banks, schools. And by the late 90s, a lot of the tech companies here in Silicon Valley. And as you could imagine, by March of 2000, when the tech bubble burst, we were hurt. We had 85% of our revenue was from tech startups in Silicon Valley. And we either had to close our doors or readjust. And I said, well, I'm an optimist. I have to find the bright side of this. And what I did was I realized, let's diversify immediately. Now, we were lacking funds because we got so hurt. So we actually took on some debt, and we took that debt and we actually gave credit to other companies in emerging markets. So we were actually giving away money. But the reason we were doing that was to attract other businesses. Because who gives out equipment and services and software when they're down, especially in a down market? And what that did was it drove business to us. They were saying, wow, this company is going to give us a free server, a free year of support. Let's give them a try. And it worked. And it worked. So now when I speak at schools or on entrepreneurship and marketing, I talk about diversification, keeping your chin up, You know, always focus on the goal and know that whatever you learn along the way is wisdom, even if they're blunders. It's very important. It's all part of wisdom.
What are some of the small things we can do today, right now, to just turn us into an optimist?
Sure. Well, that's one of my favorite questions. And it's really 3 ways. The first is gratitude. You have to be grateful for all the things in your life, even the smallest things. Because if you don't count your blessings, then you'll never be satisfied when they're staring you in the face. And that includes the mistakes. That includes the downs, because they're all wisdom. The second part is stories, like what we do. You have to hear or read stories of how others have persevered, because it makes you realize that there's hope, knowing that others have been there and you're not alone. And the last part we call the magnet. You know Mary Lou Retton, the Olympic gymnast? Well, she coined the phrase, optimism is a happiness magnet. And it really is. If you're around people that are positive, it brings you up. It gets you psyched. And conversely, if you're around people that are negative, it brings you down. You can't ignore them all the time, but you could ignore the chatter. And you could minimize the amount of time around the negative people. So be around positive people. Learn from them. Let them raise you up. That's how you become or maintain optimism even in the toughest times. And you could do it all with reality. It's important to be realistic and optimistic. Because if you're just optimistic, you're in the clouds.
Right. Well, that's some great advice. Good luck on this book, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. For more information about Contagious Optimism, log on to contagiousoptimism.com. Again, that's contagiousoptimism.com, and we'll be back with more Bay Sunday after the break.